What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Morning Lifter podcast, hosted by two smart men who love dumbbells. We cover all things strength and leadership. This is episode 8. Shawn, what is up?
How are you, Bryce?
I'm good, man. Living the dream. Happy Sunday.
Yes, happy Sunday.
How are you? How was the workout this morning?
Workout was good. Same as always, you know. In terms of consistency, I told somebody once that I was as consistent as a sunrise, so you know I don't miss. But you know my goals have changed a little bit. So as my son walks into the room here,
yeah, it's the goals changed a little bit. We want to circle back to the last episode that you and I did. It's been a couple weeks now. About the goal setting, about setting smart goals, because I want to expand just a little bit on the conversation that you and I had a day or two ago about how you need to train towards your goals. And I wanted to highlight you and I as specific case studies for that. So right now, what are your training goals? You were telling me, I want you to tell the listeners out there too.
All right, so for me right now, I mean, my current goal has been to increase strength. Hypertrophy, not as that hasn't been as big of a focus, but I've really wanted to increase strength, and that was one of the reasons I actually got back on creatine. You know, so for me, it's always been a constant battle of weight, and I know that's one of the biggest, if you want to call it, side effects, or you know, reasons why people may or may not like creatine. And so for me, it's kind of been an adjustment because my weight has gone up. But I read in the Essentials for Strength Conditioning that most people can tolerate the weight gain because the weight gain versus the strength gain is minimal. So the benefits far outseed the minor weight gain that you have.
Right, so if you can lift 20 more pounds but gain 2 pounds on the scale.
Right. And for my own diet's sake, it's been increased. More carbohydrates. Protein's been about the same, but it's really been carbohydrate intake that's affected it. But I've reaped a lot of the benefits of it, I think, at least so far. My deadlift and my squats have started to really improve, so I'm going to keep going with this and see where it goes. But that right now is kind of where I'm at. My ultimate goals have been to get back to a 500 deadlift. I want to get back to a 405 squat. My bench is all over the place because I have longer arms. My bench struggles.
Yeah, you're not biomechanically built to bench press. That's for sure, pal.
Right. So. But if I could get, I've flirted with a 315 bench before, and for me, I think that's a pretty standard. But really, I've just been focused more on posterior chain, heavy legs,
Right.
And really, I've struggled for a long time developing a good squat stance. But I think I fixed that. So I went back to my really wide stance that I had in college when I was squatting 680. That's been good. So I've had a lot of positive effects from that. That's right now where I'm at, and I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
Aside from the weight gain, which there are days where I'm like, man, I don't like this. Where the pants fit a little bit tighter, but it's not. For me, that's where I always struggle. I've always struggled with that. Ever since I lost all of my weight, I have these numbers stuck in my head, and anything over 240, then I think I'm falling off the wagon, in terms of weight, and I'm probably at 250 right now. So
yeah, that's a jacked 250.
Yeah. Yeah, depending on who you ask, I guess. But that's where I'm at, and that's where I have my own mental struggles with it, just like anybody else does.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to just bring that up briefly because, as I said, you and I were talking about it. You and I are training for almost exactly opposite goals at this point. You focusing on strength with a lot of low volume, heavy reps. Your diet's going to reflect that. You said you're taking creatine, which may cause a little bit of weight gain due to intramuscular water retention, things like that. But for you, focusing on just the number on the bar and the weights that you're lifting, like that's what it takes, right? Whereas I had the very humbling realization yesterday or 2 days ago, sorry, it was Friday, that the cardio wizard has zapped all of my strength due to running for the past 6 weeks. I could barely bench 185 for like sets of 10 to 12 on Friday when I got into the gym to do a little push-pull workout. I was hoping the strength wouldn't go that quickly, but here we are. And now granted, my running has gotten way better. My minute per mile pace has dropped significantly. My total volume has increased exponentially. So like the running is doing really, really well, but the lifting is definitely taking a back seat. I haven't even touched a deadlift bar or a squat bar for fear of not being able to run at my best. So we'll probably not even be able to squat 225 by the time this is all said and done, honestly. But that's okay. We're focusing on one thing. You're focusing on one thing, and I just wanted to share that with the listeners that we are a real life case study of train to your goals.
Sure, absolutely.
With that, we can move on into the episode. First off, one more remark is that we are now on Stitcher, the podcast platform. So you can catch us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So yeah. Also, one more thing. Are you going to the Arnold next month?
I am. Got my ticket last week. I got the early fast pass too. I paid a little bit more to get that, so I'm going to go down there super early, stay there all day. I wanted to go for a couple extra days, but I think I can only make it one day. Usually Saturday is the best day. I know Arnold will be there on Saturday, so I got a chance to see him a couple years ago when I went. So pretty cool.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have to do like a recap episode of that or something.
I'll be writing an article on it too, and we can definitely discuss that once it hits. But it's like literally 4 weeks away, I think, from this weekend. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I know Zach Mars of the Mars Bar is going to be down there, and I've been eyeballing that squat bar for a long time, and so I get a chance to go down there and test that bar out, and kind of see what it's all about. I like to go and look at the new equipment and some of the new inventions that people have come up with, and just kind of mingle around with other people. So it's always fun to do.
Great opportunity for high velocity learning, as they say, where you get a lot of like-minded individuals in the same room talking about the same stuff, thinking about the same stuff. So that'll be awesome. Looking forward to hearing all about it. With that, we can hop into today's episode. Today's episode is all about stress in the body. Stress of the mind, stress in life. So I have a series of questions that I want to ask you, Shawn, with your leadership background and kind of the real world application of it, and then I might push up my glasses and do a little science side too. But,
that's right. Adjust your bow tie before we get going here.
Yep, my Bill Nye the Science Guy bow tie. But so first off, how would you just define stress? What does being stressed mean to you? When I say, I'm stressed, or if people ask you if you're stressed, how do you respond? What is stress to you?
I mean, I think that's a really deep question. I mean, you have a basic definition of it, but I don't know how. I think the big thing is some people might call it anxiety, or worry, where you feel out of control, or you feel like you have no control, or it's a feeling of overwhelming, tension, or any number of those things, that where you're stuck and you don't know what to do or where to go or how to be, and it can impact your mental and your physical, state of mind, state of body, state of soul. And I mean, there's so much that I think can impact you. And I wrote an article about it not long ago. It was inspired by a speech I had heard from Steve Harvey that I thought was really good. And I'll touch on that here in a little bit. But stress can also be a good thing. And I think too many times we look at stress in a negative fashion, where we let it bring us down. But the right kind of stress, or if we can look at stress as an opportunity, then maybe we have a chance to control some of the chaos. But you've got to be able to take a step back, which is hard to do. I mean, there are times where I haven't been able to do that. then there are times where I do, and I think sometimes if you're in the moment, it might be hard to do, when things kind of get kind of hairy very quickly. And I think it's also if you haven't prepared yourself mentally for that stress, then you're not going to react appropriately. So here's the best example I could think of. Police officers, right? They go through tactical training all the time so that they can be prepared for those high stress situations, so that way they can make the right call if there's a gun in their face. They know whether or not to disarm or to engage, and that training helps prepare them for that. Mm-hmm. And so they use that as like an opportunity really to make the right call. So there's ways that I look at it like that. I think it depends too on how long you've been around. The more experiences you have, the more failures you're going to receive, the more, the
more apt you are to handle it and know how to cope.
Yeah, but I guess also the more experience you receive with it, and so every loss or every win from handling that stress brings, it stacks on the experience paperwork or, the added book or the added shelf or, the added brick, maybe is the better way to put it, to help yourself grow, So you can say, okay, well, I handled this situation with stress this way and it worked out well for me. Or I didn't handle it the way I should have and it didn't work out for me. So now I know I can learn from the past. And here's what I can do. Here's what I can do about it this time. So that's my long-winded answer on kind of what I think stress is all about. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier on. It's really, for each individual, it can mean or be something a little bit different. Now, the science behind it, like what you're going to be talking about here in a minute, is going to be, I think, pretty universal. But I think the way in which we handle it is all very, very unique.
Yeah, no, I really like a lot of what you said, especially about the planned versus unplanned stress. I'm going to get into that later with a real life example. But you also hit on the one major word in most textbook definitions of stress. You caught me just like White Goodman in Dodgeball. I like to read the dictionary. Stress is a feeling.
I like to break a mental sweat too.
Oh yeah, you know it. Stress is a feeling of emotional or physical tension. It taxes the body and stems from work, relationships, or anywhere in between. So you hit on tension is a big one. It's kind of a feeling of uneasiness, maybe in your mind, or even you can feel it in your gut or in your chest. But that tension is kind of like it has you on edge, right? And I think that's a really, really big part of what being stressed actually means. So moving forward with that, if I told you that stress messes with your hormones, like how would you interpret that? Like everyone's probably heard of cortisol, right? The primary stress hormone that you need to control. But if I said like, how being stressed affects your hormones, like what would your answer to that be?
Well, that's going to affect your mood. You might, if you're stressed and you're not sure how to handle it, and this happens to me, I get cranky, or I'll get moody.
Or are you just hungry when that happens?
Could be hungry, or some people, they shut down.
Yep.
Like they completely shut down because they don't know what else to do. And it's like an overload on your computer. If you overload your computer, it's going to shut down.
Yep, you get blue screened.
You're trying to perform more work than what your mind could possibly handle at that time. And it could be a combination of things. Like maybe you had a really crappy day at work. Maybe you got into a fight with your spouse and had a crappy day at work. Maybe you had a fight with your spouse, had a crappy day at work, and your kids got in trouble at school. That's an overload, where just one thing continues to pile. It's like Murphy's Law, and you got to be able to sometimes to just put things aside. And one thing thankfully I learned early on was I've always been able to leave work at work. I come home and I don't, people, my wife will ask me, how was your day? Half the time I forget.
That's really good.
I literally I shut it out. I completely block it out because I'm done. I'm done for the day. I'm not going to worry about it. That's really benefited me because now I can focus on the things that really matter. So I focus on work when I'm at work. When I'm outside of it, last thing on my mind.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to
Jim Rohn.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say Jim Rohn. He talks about that. He says when you're at work, be at work. When you're at play, be at play. Don't mix the two.
Yep. And I think it was The Rock who said, like, don't go to work 8 hours and then go home and not work on your own dreams or goals. Like, that would just leave you uninspired or something like that.
Right.
I probably butchered that, but same type of thing there. Leave work at work and, focus on yourself outside of work. So it's really refreshing to hear you say that you have the ability to leave work at work. A lot of people do not. I don't. I can't. I physically cannot. I'm checking emails at night and over the weekend and stuff like that, which is not a good habit. But
yeah, that's not...
I'm doing my best, trying to limit that.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, you don't have to be perfect at this. It's something that is a continuation of getting a little bit better every single day. So
yeah, in due time. I'm still learning. Still new to this whole professional career world, being 24. So learning the ins and outs.
Absolutely.
But back to the cortisol. So this is what happens inside your body when you feel stress. So you have these glands on top of your kidneys that release both cortisol and adrenaline. So cortisol being the stress hormone. Most people know what adrenaline is. That's like the fight or flight type response. So first is the cortisol. So you get that cortisol dumped into your body. And then to combat the cortisol, your body will release the adrenaline to kind of pick you back up and to overcome that stressful situation. I did air quotes around that stressful situation because most of the time it's perceived stress, not actual stress. Adrenaline will increase your heart rate. You'll probably get a little sweaty. Your blood vessels and veins and arteries will vasodilate, which means they get wider to allow blood flow to circulate more rapidly because that creates oxygen. And then cortisol will increase your blood glucose level, which is your blood sugar. It allows your brain to use glucose more efficiently so you can think clearer during these times of perceived stress. And I say perceived because a lot of the times it's not physical stressors like what our ancestors used to deal with. No woolly mammoths are chasing us around at the office when we feel stressed. But this is kind of the way our body developed at the time. So cortisol also will stop all non-essential body functions, meaning you will not have to use the bathroom. Your reproductive system will potentially stop. Your digestive system will stop as well. So all these things happen, right? And the issue with this is then when you get a buildup of cortisol in the brain, it builds up and it just sits there, right? So if you have this buildup of cortisol in your brain, then you're constantly going to be fueling your body with adrenaline, right? And then it's going to be harder and harder to unwind at the end of the day. So that's why the recovery and the de-stress is a lot more important as well. But those are just kind of all the things that happen internally that most people don't really understand. So when Eminem raps about his knees are getting weak and his palms are sweaty, that's what happens. He's feeling stress. And that was from the beginning of the song Lose Yourself, featured in 8 Mile.
There's an interesting point that you bring up about that because Simon Sinek talks about that too, where, for some people, they look at the palms sweaty and, things getting clammed up and they look at that and that can be the negative side of anxiety. And Simon talks about in a speech where he was watching the Olympics and all the reporters were asking these top-level athletes...
You're stealing my thunder. I was going to hear this later. I know exactly where you're going with it.
They said, were you nervous? And they all said, no, I was excited. And so he decided, okay, well, I'm going to test a theory here. And so anytime you get nervous, instead of saying, I'm getting anxious or I'm not sure what's going to happen here, if you tell yourself, well, hey, this is kind of exciting, then it actually has a way of calming you down. And it's like self-coaching or self-motivating or self-calming, I guess, as a way to kind of talk yourself down, but to make you feel confident, and feeling like you're going to accomplish something that can be big. So there are some ways that you can go about fixing that as well.
Yeah, I love that example because looking back, obviously I did not know about this when I was younger. Looking back, I had the exact same reaction from when I was about to take a very large exam in school and to when I was standing behind the blocks ready to race at conference championships in swimming. Heart starts beating a little faster, you can feel it, you can get a little tingly sensation, palms are sweaty a little bit, like you're getting hyped up essentially, right?
Right.
Same thing happens when you're getting ready to take a test, is like, oh shit, my heart's beating a little faster, my palms getting a little sweaty, mind starts racing, you feel like a little bit more energy. Yeah, so it's the exact same, except one you really look forward to and being athletic events, and the other one is you don't really love taking a test, but you know, if you can trick your mind, then you'll be better off in the long term.
Right.
So for those of you that are just tuning in, we are huge Simon Sinek guys. He has a lot to offer and is a great resource. I would implore you to check him out. A lot of really good findings and good words of wisdom coming from him. So what do you think some of the long-term effects of this constant stress response signaling in your body are?
Well, I mean, I don't know all the science behind it, but it's not good for you. I can tell you that much. I mean, you want the most basic answer. It's not good for you, and you've got to find a way. It's natural, first of all, right? So you're going to have those days. You're going to have those moments, and that's normal. If you let it control you, you're gonna have some real issues where you might stop sleeping. You could go through insomnia. When I get super stressed, and everybody deals with it differently, I'm a stress eater. I've been a stress eater, so I will, as you hear the term, you eat your problems away. And then if you let that control you, and some people, they let that turn into it's an easy cop out. That's the way I kind of look at it. It's an easy cop out to say, well, I feel like crap. I'm all anxious or I'm nervous, so I'm going to go to McDonald's and I'm going to house a 50-piece nugget.
You eat your feelings.
And but then you do that every day. Yeah. Well, now all of a sudden you're looking at more than just stress problems. Now you're looking at high blood pressure. You're looking at obesity. You're looking at a slew of other problems. Weight gain, everything else, right? So then you might start to lose confidence in your own judgment. And I mean, I'm not a doctor, but these are things that are pretty well documented that could happen, and then all of a sudden you become worthless in a way because you've let something completely take over you. And it goes back to, I think we had talked about it before, Jordan Peterson talks about, you've got to bear your burdens. Things are going to happen, and it's not going to be fun. There's going to be days of high stress, but that's where you've got to find ways around it, and you've got to find ways to mitigate it. So one of the things that I love to do to start the day to really keep me stress-free, that's why I work out in the mornings like that. Because how many people wake up in the morning and they say, well, shit, I don't really want to go to work. Yeah. Like, now I got to get up. Why do so many people hate Mondays?
14% of your life.
Because they hate what they're doing. And it's like, who cares if it's Monday? Who cares if it's Tuesday? Like, so for me, every day I wake up and it's like, hey, I get to work legs today, or I'm going to work chest today. And so I get a chance to take the stress out early on, and I take the stress out on my body, and then when I'm done, I say, guess what? I just accomplished something that probably most people haven't even done yet today. And that gives me, when you have a sense of accomplishment early in the morning, then it's a lot easier to take on the rest of the day.
They call those easy wins, right? Like, that's why...
Yeah.
Who was that? The Admiral in the Navy at a commencement speech a couple years ago that circulated.
Yes.
Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff is make your bed in the morning, right? Easy win.
Right.
So for you, easy win, working out. And it's interesting that you say like that relieves your stress of the day, because I work out in the afternoons for the same reason. After work is to unwind and decompress, and that's kind of like my transition from work to life, is to take that that half hour to an hour and go run or go lift and do something. And then it's like, okay, like now I'm done for the day, right? I can unwind and relax. So different perspectives on there. Both accomplish the same thing, of course.
Absolutely.
Some of the more common long-term effects of stress being anxiety, depression, trouble sleeping. So like I said, that buildup of cortisol in your brain will release adrenaline, so that adrenaline will keep you awake, you won't be able to sleep. And this is where it gets into a pretty rhythmic cycle, and you mentioned stress eating, because studies have shown, and I don't have any specific ones, but I remember it being highlighted in my physiology courses, individuals who sleep under 6 hours per night, the cortisol that causes an increase in the hormonal response of ghrelin, which is in your stomach. That's the appetite hormone. So that's the hormone that lets you know you're hungry. So if you have an increase in ghrelin, you're going to eat more, obviously. So individuals who sleep less than 6 hours per night were shown then in a case study to consume upwards of 400 to 600 more calories in the subsequent day. So long-term weight gain because you can't stop eating because your body thinks you're hungry because you didn't sleep. So it's a very rhythmic cycle, one that would be hard to break, obviously. That's a perfect transition to our next topic, stress eating. You mentioned it. How do you combat it? Do you do it? And how would you advise anybody to work past it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've done it before. And there will be days where I probably will continue to do it. But it's not like it's something I don't make it a point. That's not something where I say, I had a bad day, so I'm going to shovel down some chocolate candies. No, that's not the point.
You sure? Because Valentine's Day is coming up, Shawn.
Yeah, well, I had some candy last night, but and that's something for me. That's really easy. I get those fat kid tendencies still,
Same.
And it's really, really easy for me to go overboard. And that's where the self-control, as we've talked about, Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. There's truth in that. And so instead of saying, I'm just going to house, a whole box, maybe I'll have 5 or 6 and then I'm done, So that's where having your own discipline, and you've got to have discipline and determination. And that's where you come up with, I mentioned on your Instagram profile the other day, right? I called it the method. So something that I actually had spawned a t-shirt idea. You had responded like, what do you mean by that? Well, the method is hard work, effort, and attitude. Like, that's the method. And so when you start to work the method of those 3 things, the hard work, the effort, the attitude, that creates the discipline, that creates the determination. And so when you work that system correctly, then you start to find a lot of positivity behind that, and you start to see progress.
Everything else falls into place.
Right. And so whatever that method is for you, so for me, the hard work piece is the physical weightlifting piece. The effort is trying to drive through the weights, then driving through the day, and then continuing to try to be in that leadership mindset. And then the attitude part is getting up in the morning and saying, I'm going to tackle this and I'm going to be, positive about it. And sometimes you might hit 2 out of 3. Like, I'm not, I don't have the best attitude every single day. There are days where my attitude sucks. And my wife, God bless her, she has no problem calling me out on it. And it checks me, and so it's nice to have people like that in your life that will check you when, you're acting a fool. So, sometimes I might recognize it, or I might see other people who are around me that are cancerous, and then I have a way to kind of say, hey, that's not somebody you want to be around, or don't let it bother you, or just move on to something else, And so every day requires hard work, effort, and attitude. And so for me, that's something where I just started to think about, that's the method. That's the method to combat stress. That's the method to get through your day. We all have a certain method. We kind of wake up and habitualize, And so when you're kind of just drifting around, like I had mentioned earlier, then you're lost, and it's a lot easier then to get stress and to have anxiety. And when you just believe that about yourself and say, well, I always have anxiety. Well, why? Well, I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. Well, you're going to fail at some point in time. You need to get over that. Just step into it, and just go. And the parachute will open up. Eventually, it'll open up. And you might get beat up along the way, but it will, it will help you. You'll be okay.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You're right. It's good that you have your wife Allie. She keeps you in check for sure. No, I'm just kidding. You do well.
Without a doubt.
So we mentioned earlier in the show that stress can sometimes be a good thing, right? So literally anytime you exercise, that is a stress event on your body. But what it does is then under proper recovery conditions of hydration, nutrition, sleep, and rest, your body responds positively to it, right? So not all stress is bad.
Not all stress is bad. No, absolutely not. That stress can be good for you. If you think about it like this, think about a tree, right? How do you get a tree? How do you get a fruit tree? How do you get any tree?
You plant the seed? I don't know.
You got to plant it. Yeah, okay. You're exactly right. You start with a seed, right? And so if you left a seed on a windowsill for 15 years, would it ever grow? No. And so what you got to do is you actually have to dig a hole and plant it in the ground. And then you have to cover it for it to grow. Now, can you imagine the amount of force it would take for a seed to sprout in the ground and to push through the compacted soil, to actually push its way up out of the dirt? Think about the amount of stress it would require, right? And so all the while, the Chinese bamboo tree takes 5 years before it actually breaks through the soil because of the intricate root system it's developing. And for the amount of stress that it takes to break through the ground, you could look at that the same way in life. And the soil, they say, you get dirt put on you. Well, when you put dirt on a seed, they don't call it dirt, they call it soil, right? Because soil has nutrients. Those nutrients then feed that seed, and then when you water it, that's how it grows. And I thought, when I heard him talk about that is such an outstanding analogy, because we all get shit thrown on us, right? I mean, what's one of the best fertilizers out there?
Manure.
It's manure. It's manure, right? And so when we get shit thrown on us, we as people look at that as a bad thing. But really, if you look at it as a way to how can you learn from a situation, and how can you help it, affect you positively so that you can actually grow from it. There are ways to grow from it. When we find out ways to grow from it, that's how we actually become taller, we become better. It helps us achieve more than we ever thought we'd be able to achieve. And so those are the good kinds of stress. And there's an old saying in the Bible, or just in general, it says, judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, right? So you should be, look at people by what they do, not by what they say, because everybody can talk a talk, but not everybody can walk a walk. And, I heard Les Brown talk about this, and it was hilarious. He was talking about the Chinese bamboo tree. And he said, can you imagine if you were in your front yard watering this random spot, of dirt for 5 years? What would your neighbors say? They'd come over and they'd say, what the hell are you doing? And you say, well, I'm watering this Chinese bamboo tree. And they said, it's been 3 years. There's nothing to show. Give it up, right? Like, there's nothing there. What are you doing? And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, it sprouts up 90 feet tall. And then they see the hard work and the effort and the attitude that you put through. See, there's the method again, right? All of a sudden it shows up. And then they come to you and say, hey, wow, that's amazing. And it could be a business. And then all of a sudden they say, hey, do you got any extra jobs? Hey, by the way, do you have any extra work? And so it's when you're consistent with your own method, you don't have to worry about what anybody else is saying, what anybody else is talking about, because you're putting forth, you're putting forth the action that it takes. And so that stress is something that you've got to find a way to manifest, and that's why goal setting, like we talked about in the last episode, that's why goal setting is so important. Because when you've got a goal set down, it doesn't matter what anybody else is going to tell you.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're looking at that goal, it doesn't matter what someone else is saying. They might say, well, why do you keep watering that same spot? Nothing's grown. You should just give it up. Well, you might have written down on your sheet, my goal might take 5 years. And if you're in year 3, you still got 2 more years to go. I heard Eric Thomas talk about this. He says it takes 21 years to be 21 years old. You can't rush it. You can't rush the situation. And so sometimes you just have to let it be and let the process work. And there's nothing else that can be done with that. Sometimes that's it. Like that's it. That's all you can do.
Right. I like that a lot. Want to know why I love the bamboo tree analogy? Is because that bamboo is one of the hardest woods that grows in the forest, but it takes 5 years to get there. Second would be that we mentioned weightlifting as a way to de-stress. The squat is the perfect example for life and is a metaphor for stress, because when difficult things are trying to keep you down, the only way to overcome them is to stand up and face them, which is exactly what a squat does. And lastly is that I thought you were really going to go with iron sharpens iron there with the Bible reference, which means that it takes tough situations to create tough people. But they didn't just get tough on accident, right? Same way like pressure makes diamonds, literally. So sometimes in life, stress isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it like this too, right? I mean, so if you want to look at the Bible for just a couple standard scenarios, right? I'm not saying that this is condoned. But some of the biggest prophets, especially in the Old Testament, they all screwed up. Moses was a murderer. He had killed an Egyptian and then fled to the desert for 40 years before God said, I want you to go free your people. So tell me he wasn't under some stress? He destroyed the 10 Commandments because he got so mad at all the people who started worshiping the wrong idols. He broke the tablets, and he had to go back to God and say, I screwed up, right? And so he let his own emotions get the better of him because other people weren't listening, It happens to everybody. That's part of being human, right? And so, who was it? I think it was King Solomon, committed adultery, There are some of the biggest, most famous, wealthiest people that have ever lived in biblical times that they all screwed up. And that's something that's what makes us human. And we've all let stress impact us in some way, shape, or form. But the more that we can really, not necessarily control that, I think, but find ways to mitigate it and find ways to overcome it, then that's when we can actually make positive impacts.
Right, absolutely. To kind of put a bow on all this stress talk here, what are your favorite ways to manage your stress and to de-stress and kind of your coping mechanisms for it? You already mentioned that you leave work at work and that you work out in the morning. Is there anything else that you do specifically or that you know of that helps to combat stress?
Sometimes it's just being just being in a quiet place, and just letting yourself, meditate, I guess. For me, sometimes prayer works, where I might sit down and pray for a little while, or reading, or I'll listen to some of my YouTube subscriptions, things like that. Working out in the morning, obviously, is one of my biggest ones. But I've also found out the best way to kind of not stress is to stop worrying.
Yep.
And that's, for most people, that's the hardest thing to do, is to let go of the worry. Because it's something that, I think for people in general, worry is also control. Worry is the ability to control your, a situation, even though you don't have any control over it anyways.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It just causes unnecessary stress. I've had people say, I'm always worried about, well, what if this happens? And I say, well, what if it doesn't? don't, the chances are pretty high that the worst case scenario that we all think about, that's what happens when we start to worry, which causes the stress. And then when we go to bed, we're worried because we're worried. And then because we're worried, we continue to lay there and we worry because we worry because we worry.
We worry about worrying, right?
And so then it just impacts everything else. And so number one, I think worry is it's a human invention. It's a human invention that does no good. What ends up happening is we worry about situations that we can't control. And I've been lucky enough to really figure that out. And there was a book called Imagine Heaven by John Burke that I read that really changed my thoughts on worry. And I don't really worry anymore because I've discovered that it doesn't matter and I'm not in control of it, because the future's unset and the past is the past, and you can only worry about literally right now. Tomorrow's not promised, not even the next hour is promised. What's only promised is right now. So when you spend all of your time worrying, you're doing the day, you're doing the moment a disservice, which also means you're doing yourself a disservice. All you can do is how effectively can you react? How effectively can you react? And that's the best that I think that we can do.
I like that a lot. Yeah, worrying is literally betting against yourself. And, one thing that I've been focusing on, especially this year with all the running and everything, is that, perception is reality, right? Like, reality happens, but how you perceive it is your reality. And if you can change your perception and maybe, mindset reframing, I guess, is what I've kind of been working on, is how you perceive different situations and, the responses and things like that. It can completely do a 180 for how you are interpreting those situations that maybe you once thought were stressful, but really you've come to find that they're not that stressful, and things like that, or reframing what you thought was a catastrophic loss into a positive opportunity, maybe, things like that. So I think that is a huge technique, and obviously that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight, in terms of... And none of it will. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of being able to manage your stress, you mentioned the yoga, deep breathing, meditation. I don't do any of that, but what I do is, every morning, I know you work out, that puts you in a good spot to tackle the day. I just take 2 or 3 minutes and kind of just sit at the end of my bed and really just think it, visualize what my day is going to look like, kind of how I envision it going, a perfect scenario, kind of how athletes do. I know Michael Phelps was big into visualization when he was swimming. He would visualize the perfect race, and he also would visualize what the everything that could possibly go wrong so he could account for it. And that was held true in 2008. His goggles filled up with water in 200 fly, and he relied solely on stroke count to get to the wall first, and he won, and that was a part of his 8 gold medals in Beijing. So kind of just visualization tactics. And also too, like you said, having hobbies, being able to unplug away. We get a lot of, smartphones, as good as they are, and being able to stay connected, they also cause a lot of stress in people's lives. Habitual checking of it, always feeling the need to see what everybody else is doing on social media and things like that. That can cause a lot of perceived stress. Like I said, perception is reality, things like that. Lastly is a tactic I learned from a psychology professor when I was in undergrad. I chew gum a lot. So we mentioned some of the physiological effects of stress and how they kind of change your hormonal regulation. Well, if you chew gum, that is tricking your body into thinking you're eating, right? So if you're eating, then your body thinks oh, I'm not in a state of danger or harm. This isn't actually that stressful of a scenario. So I like to do is I chew gum. I chewed gum during a lot of the tests that I took when I was younger. That's a good feeling. So, because that stems back to, our ancestors, is that if our ancestors had the time to eat and, to gather berries and plants and stuff or whatever, then they were not in stressful situations. So chewing gum, it also keeps me occupied and prevents me from stress eating, right? Yeah, I mean I think that's very practical. That's the goal. With that, I guess we can probably wrap this up. Maybe get to some DM questions. I've got a couple here. What are your thoughts on working out and training while sick or feeling under the weather?
You want to go first or you want me?
I think it's all you, boss.
Okay. Here's my thoughts. Do it. Do it. I mean, sick, so I think there's a lot of levels of sick. If you've got the flu, probably not the best idea, right? If you've got a sinus infection, I think you push through it. That's just me, Feeling under the weather, no, do it. Because there's a good chance you're going to feel better anyways. Like, I'll work out with a sinus infection. It'll clear me up. I'll feel a lot better. But again, that's part of that discipline. That's an easy way to say, well, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not feeling good today. I'm not going to do it. The last time being sick caused me to miss a lift was 2012 when I was running 104-degree fever and I was throwing up every hour.
Just the fact that you remember that is impeccable.
And here's why. It's because the first thing I said to myself was, I'm going to miss my lift. Like, I remember that because I was like, shit, I'm only going to get 3 lifts in for the week. But that I remember that specifically because of that. And so, if you're getting surgery, then you're going to need to recover. I think, if you're running a high degree fever and you've got chills and you're vomiting, those severe, don't lift if you got coronavirus. You want to make sure that you're being smart, but at the same time, don't give yourself an excuse for, well, I don't feel good today. Well, then you'll give yourself an excuse the next time and the next time and the next time. But there's I believe in sweating it out, whether or not there's any science behind it or not. I think that, when you do that, you feel better. You'll feel, again, it's that sense of accomplishment. That's kind of where I live.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. I mean, the super scientific answer for everything is, it depends. So I was actually prone to sinus infections when I was swimming. I don't know if it was just like the chlorine or being in the hot, humid air and then going outside in the cold in winter, stuff like that. Anyway, I got a lot of sinus infections when I was swimming. My doctor told me that it wasn't a reason to miss practice or training or anything like that. And, I asked him, what if I could go, no go type deal. He told me that any issue that was like stomach related, so whether it be like stomach bugs, throwing up, diarrhea, whatever, probably best to take a day or two off because those things clear up relatively quickly as well, usually a 24, 48 hour thing. Anything, sinus related, I also would go through more often than not. Like anything though, for me it's up to auto regulation. So go with what you feel, but at the same time, then it comes back to a phrase that a lot of young age males probably heard in locker rooms growing up was, don't be an expletive for a female dog, right? So,
don't be a wimp.
Yeah, don't be a wimp is a better way to put it. So, it depends, but like I said, if you got a little cough.
But there too, like that, like if you, if it's working out and you work out at a gym and if you've got a workout partner, then that's a good way to keep each other accountable. Like saying, well, I don't feel good. Suck it up and get in here.
Yeah, right.
But when you're doing it on your own, then that requires a lot more. That it's going to be harder, without a doubt.
And you also touched on like the endorphins, the feel-good hormones after a workout is that sense of accomplishment.
Right.
Like that'll probably lift your spirits at least a little bit. So
yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So I think I already know the answer to this, but Shawn, what is your favorite piece of specialty equipment in your arsenal? And can I throw out my guess?
Sure.
So I think it's either the chains that you just recently got, or it is your safety squat bar.
Yeah, I mean those are definitely some really nice pieces. I really like the landmine linebacker attachment that I got. That's from Titan Fitness. A lot of people hate on Titan Fitness, and that's fine. But for me, on my budget, it's affordable, and I haven't had a problem with anything of it. So for me, I'm just going to keep doing that. It's, I think you should buy what you can afford and buy good equipment and leave it at that. With that being said, man, that's tough. Everything that I have serves a specific purpose. I don't know if I have a favorite. I mean, my safety squat bar is probably one of my most used pieces of equipment. The chains that I've gotten, I've fallen in love with. I can't believe I haven't had those sooner. It might be a toss-up, between those two things. The Smith machine, I love the Smith machine. The fact that it's got lateral movement to it, where it's not just on a plane where all it does is go vertical. It's got horizontal movement to it. And if you're not sure what I mean, then go check out the review that I have on my site about it. So I guess there's a little bit of a tie, a little bit of a toss-up between that. So I think I don't know if there's a favorite. I guess you could say everything that I have serves a very specific purpose.
There you go. That's a good way of putting it.
And that's why I get specialty bars.
Mm-hmm.
I have the safety squat bar so that I can hit Hatfield squats, and I can do certain things, each bar, like I said, each bar serves a different purpose. So, but some things that I want to get a Rogue deadlift bar. I want to get a Rogue Ohio bar. I want to get the Mars bar. There's a lot of barbells that I have on my list to get down the road. My favorite piece, though, I could tell you the one thing that I do want, I don't have. My favorite piece of equipment in the whole world is the Hammer Strength ISO lateral row machine. By far.
Is that the one with the chest support?
Yes.
Where you load plates on the sides?
Yes, and you sit upright. That's my favorite.
That's a good one.
Because you can hit, 5, 6, 7, 8 different angles. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I love it. It's my favorite. So if anybody has one and willing to donate it, send it my way.
Yeah, I mean, what is lifting
of our dozens of listeners?
Yeah, what is lifting besides geometry, right? It's basically all just about angles. Right. What is life except for geometry?
Right. So, but that would be my favorite piece of equipment if I had it.
Yeah.
But it is on my list to get. It's just expensive.
I can imagine, but it also lasted for 100 years. So, last question. So, I actually got asked this one like a week ago. Honestly, didn't really have an answer, so I'm looking forward to seeing how you answer it.
I'm looking at this right now. This is pretty good.
What do you guys like to do besides work out and talk about working out?
Plan about working out.
Think about working out.
Sleep about working out.
Yeah.
And then work out and think about working out. No, but well, for me, my life is pretty basic outside of this. For crying out loud, at the beginning of this whole session, my son walks in, and he wants to, what am I going to do when I'm done? Probably go downstairs and play Mario with him. I'm just a normal dad.
Because Donkey Kong is a villain, remember?
He is. I ended up finding that out. And we got
schooled by a 4-year-old like 2 weeks ago.
4-year-old, yes. Yeah, I could not. I guess don't challenge a 4-year-old on things that they probably know more than you about. So
that was wild.
Yes, it was. So it's for me, it's basic. But I can tell you that I've become so passionate about it is because this is so ingrained in my life now. I'll go to work, and at lunchtime I'll read books about leadership. I'll read books about strength training, I just it's part of it's become a little bit more than a hobby. I think it's become an obsession of sorts, which is perfectly fine. I think that's okay. But what I do besides, I'm just a normal dad. I'll go out and I'll do things with my kids. We'll play outside when the weather permits, and I take my kids to school and pick them up and hang out with them, and I watch football. I still watch college football. I'm still pretty heavily involved with Kent State. I watch the Browns, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, me too. Cleveland Indians fan. I mean, that's I like sports and do other stuff outside of this, but I'm actually a pretty laid back and quiet guy. I don't have that many friends, simply for the sake of that. I don't know if I need that many friends.
Yep.
So, I guess that's the best answer I can give.
Yeah, that pretty much puts a bow on your life from what I know about it. Kind of same for me. So I like to cook, which feeds into my love of working out and fueling my body for performance. I also like to watch sports. I am a Red Sox fan, and they're getting rid of a generational talent in Mookie Betts, which does not have me thrilled. Don't love it, but they're my boys through and through. I like to go to breweries, hang out with friends, do normal young adult stuff too. I also read a lot, so much like you, Shawn. I'm not sure I would consider my genre leadership, but more like personal development. So Simon Sinek, Ben Bergeron, not self-help, but along those lines of personal development, like how to make myself a better version of me type deal.
Since you're into the personal development side too, you should really look into more Jim Rohn stuff. He's the one that really coined that phrase.
I need to get into Jim Rohn. I know you're basically in his cult.
He has been one of the biggest influences for me. That's kind of where it all started, was I came across this guy.
Yeah.
He started talking about personal development. I was like, it's just the stuff that he had to say I was completely entranced. And then it became an obsession.
Yeah, well, obsessions aren't always bad.
No, not at all.
Lastly, I play golf a lot. My dad plays golf. My grandmother and her husband play golf. So it's like a family event. We like to play golf whenever we're together. Obviously, that is weather dependent as well. I play video games too. I play Call of Duty a lot. So I usually don't watch a whole lot of TV. When I run on treadmills, I'll usually throw on a Netflix episode or something, but my free time is mostly spent doing podcast stuff and researching episodes or reading, or every now and then I'll play a little Call of Duty on the weekends if I'm just hanging out. But yeah, normal young adult stuff. So I don't know. For me, I guess it's more like everyone's probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And the top one is that like self-actualization, like reaching your full potential, all that stuff. I think that's kind of what I'm after, so I kind of tailor my lifestyle to that. I know that my long-term goals and what I want out of life aren't going to happen within the next 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even. So, I'm chipping away at it one piece at a time, stuff like that, all of those cliches. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts on this episode before we sign off?
I think just to kind of summarize, don't let stress get the better of you. It's one of those things where we all go through it. You got to find your own way to combat it. I had mentioned earlier, it starts with the method. Whatever your method is, you gotta go with it.
Well said. Yep. So, until next time, guys. Keep it strong, keep it safe, be your best you, just be better.
See ya.